We have a lot to get into today. How you doing? Rob Hunter hanging out with you, obviously solo today. Mike, feeling a bit under the weather, but he'll be back with us tomorrow. And he's got lots to share as well. He was fired up today to talk about the main topic of the day, former President Donald Trump's comments about Kamala Harris's race, becoming black. Uh-oh. Trump getting into it again, getting all kinds of negative publicity from that. We'll share that with you in here just a moment. But the comment section is open. I want to hear from you today. Since Mike's not here, play the role with me. What have you noticed out there? What are you paying attention to? Let me know in the chat. Now, before we get into Donald Trump's now infamous comments, I'm going to explain where I'm coming from. It's where I always come from. I don't care about sides anymore. I think both sides are horrible at the moment. I don't think either side is really trying to appeal to anyone other than the people they already appeal to. Because what we're going to learn today from President Donald Trump is a communication lesson. That when you're seeking an important position like the president, maybe for you it's a promotion, maybe Greg Meekin, for you it's your radio show, Grizz, maybe for you while you're out and about, hanging out with your people. Yes, Rhonda, I am all alone today, but I'm not alone because you are here with me. But the communication lesson when seeking out something important comes down to this key word, discipline. Because all the momentum was going the way of Donald Trump because Joe Biden was old. Joe Biden was a terrible president of the United States. But all of that has changed. And I'm not looking at this as I'm hopeful one side wins or the other. I'm just looking at the strategy of it, what can be done, and how you maintain discipline on the campaign trail. But first, did you guys see this video? I got to find it here. This is from Heathrow Airport. Some of these climate protesters, similar to people who have gone into museums and poured things on paintings, which is absolutely crazy. But let's just take a little watch of this. I know it's kind of small on your screen. I got to figure out how to format these videos better. I don't know what they're spraying. I didn't bother to look into it, but they're walking around Heathrow Airport in London, spraying everything down. And I love that both Rondas are here. Rondas, what's up? Thank you very much for being here. If you do have a chance, share this out because these are conversations that Mike and I get to have with you that are a little bit different. I love the spraying of the sign too because we all have these now. I don't really need the sign. I can look up on my phone where the gate is. But I bring this up, and as you share this out, invite people into this conversation. Let's just do a little compare and contrast. Do you think that what these climate protesters have done, do you think this is effective? Is this going to get people to go, you know what? Yeah, these people are right. Everybody's right here. That we should go into airports, or we shall turn down the volume because it's irrelevant. We should go in and spray paint signs in the airport, or we should go put paint on a Van Gogh painting because we're protesting climate change or lack of action on climate. And this is a good question, Brendan. Brendan with us as Business USA. Totally all organic, chemical-free paint. Won't cause any problems. But it's a dumb statement, right? Because it doesn't work. It's not influential. It is trying to do one thing. Because when you communicate with someone, you can do a couple of different things. You can affirm their beliefs, let you guys know, hey, we're on the same side. Or you can take a step outside of that and you can try to influence. What you see here with these climate protests is not trying to influence you. No, not at all. They are trying to affirm others' beliefs that already think climate change is a major problem. So they're trying to gain credibility with that crowd, which is great. It's fantastic. It's done all over the world. Most of the media is affirmation business. I know it's a big secret, right? That nobody really tells you, but behind the walls of the media, that's what we talk about. We talk about the fact that we're in the affirmation business, that we need to find people that agree with us and we need to appeal to those people. And that's it. But I think about an issue like climate change. And I think about all of the elite leaders that try to convince you that what you're doing is wrong, that you need to do more on the climate, and you need to take action, fly less, have a smaller home, put solar on your roof like I have done. But you think about that because they're not leading by example. John Kerry, the climate czar for the United States of America, going around the world negotiating climate deals on private jets. And this is what I always thought about people trying to influence me to reduce my carbon footprint. Lead by example. Do it via Zoom. Do it your climate meetings somewhere else. Then everyone doesn't have to have a private jet to fly in because it looks obnoxious and it looks ridiculous. So they're not influencing you. And they're not even attempting to influence you. They don't even have a plan as to what you can do because they don't really care. They dismiss, move on, and stay up here in their elite little levels. Just going to check on some of the comments here. Uh-oh. Lynn, what's happening, man? Lynn's in a pissy mood. It's too early in the day to be in a pissy mood, although sometimes you wake up in a pissy mood. I get it. And yeah, hold on, Greg. Do you really think Greg is saying, hey, Rob, thank God it's August. July was mental. Do we really think August is going to be better? August, we're getting closer to the election. It's still hot out. I still have an AC leak, trying to come up with some options. It's hot in my house, but we're managing through it because we've lost perspective in America, right? And then this is something that I think could be used to be influential in a presidential election. For example, Brittany Griner. Brittany Griner is a WNBA player. She plays for the Phoenix Mercury, and she's playing for the U.S. team in the Olympics over in Paris, which we're going to talk more about the Olympics today also, because the trans-female biological male in women's boxing got a woman to quit after 46 seconds. She says, I've never been hit like that before. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But back to this climate change idea, back to this idea of influence, because that's really what's missing. I hear you, Lynn. Too many roommates? Man, that can be challenging, right? Everybody's not doing the dishes. Everybody's fighting about things. I get that all day. Big Nate, what's happening? It's my man, Nate. How you doing, Nate? Good to see you, my brother. So influence. So this is what I teach. Now that I'm not on the radio, I'm a communications consultant, communication specialist, communication expert. And I advise clients is to live in the moment and be influential. Be bigger. Be inspirational. Get someone to do something they normally wouldn't do. Perfect example of that, Dr. Martin Luther King. He did it probably better than anybody because he looked at a nation in the 50s and 60s and he told us what was wrong with it. But he never advocated for violence. He advocated for better. Think about in politics, Ronald Reagan doing the same thing. Morning in America, repeating that message. He always had a sunny disposition, a good, welcoming tone of his voice. And he's gone down as one of America's best presidents, in part because of his personality and in part because he was the great communicator in chief. So again, I'll bring this back up just to put it back in. If you're just joining us, this is from Heathrow earlier this week. And this has been seen numerous times. We've had people do this to paintings, famous paintings, Van Gogh's, spraying it. Thankfully, a lot of the paintings are covered by glass. So, usually it's okay. But this is obviously not influential. This is just something you see and you roll your eyes and say, all right, great. I get that these people's cause is climate change and airports are a big cause of carbon emissions. Understand. But is spraying this right there, is that going to get me to stop lying? No, it's not. So it's not meant to be influential. It's meant to affirm beliefs. So we now enter one Donald John Trump. And I know that Mike Russell, who obviously is not with us today, is not feeling great. Mike Russell's going to have some comments. Support. So I'm going to back that up just a second. I'll play it in just a second. And this is something that, what I love about working with Mike is Mike and I have always been able to disagree. And we're seeing this election very differently. We're seeing it from different angles, different perspectives. And I think that's what's great because oftentimes in media, you don't get a lot of good, deep disagreements. And you guys may also disagree with me, which we welcome comments because I know in the current lexicon of Democrat speak, I'm weird. And I own my weirdness because I look at the world in a certain way that might be different from you, Rhonda, from you, Nate, from Lynn, you. But that's the point of getting together because if we combine our perspectives, we have a big, broad perspective. Hey, Val. Val from Alberta in the house. Val, if you haven't been consistent with us here in Russell and Hunter, we're now on Monday through Friday at noon Arizona time, 3 p.m. Eastern time right now, noon Arizona time. Val was here in the States, had a government bureaucratic problem and had to go back to Canada, so she's joining in. Good friends with Greg Meekin. Val, welcome. And, Rhonda, you're kind of right. I love this term, legalized vandalism. So let's think about vandalism in terms of language, because this is exactly what Donald Trump did. He became a verbal vandal. That's a new term. I'm going to write that down because that one's pretty good. And when you're a verbal vandal, are you trying to influence people to vote for you, or are you trying to cause a stir? So let's play you a 1.5-minute clip, of which you can listen here right here. Trump is at the National Association of Black Journalists. And I give him credit for showing up, but I don't give him credit for the way he handled this answer because it highlights the underlying challenge that Donald Trump always has. Communication. He lacks discipline to stay on message because he trusts himself to just go into the belly of the beast, so to speak, because the National Association of Black Journalists, not Trump fans. So again, that's where the credit comes in because he's willing to show up, but he shows up in a kind of a piss poor mood, knowing that he's up against some tough questions. And it's a tough question that he didn't answer very well because, again, he lacks discipline. So this is something that we can take in our own lives. And this isn't to get outraged about or call an election about. This is an example of when you're in a pressure situation, maybe in a meeting, maybe with a friend. Lynn, maybe it's with your roommates, where you have these disagreements and these challenges and they come at you with a difficult question. It's all about how you respond and how you stay disciplined. So this is the former president at this meeting yesterday with the NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists. Again, mostly a black audience. So here's Trump. And here's the question.
Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is
give me a
literally
definition
the words
then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a
You see, he's combative. He's not just asking about how you define DEI. He's combative, which is fine because this journalist is combative. But see, as a communications coach and specialist, what I would advise the president to do is let her come at you aggressive and you just knock it down. You just crush that aggression and you answer the question in a positive, inspiring way. Here we go.
Sir, I'm asking you a question, a very direct question.
Define it for me, if you would.
I just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time.
So far, he's okay. So far, so good.
Not directly, very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black.
Dude. Really? Now remember, Trump's donated to Kamala more than once. There's that famous check with the famous Donald Trump signature on it. Really, though? Come on. I actually didn't know Kamala Harris had any Indian heritage until maybe 4 years ago. But I knew she was black. Her dad's black. It just defies logic and lacks discipline. And this is what, Lynn, to your point that is now on the screen, and if you're listening to the podcast, by the way, we do this live every day at noon, Arizona time, And you can comment on Facebook, you can comment on YouTube, and you can comment on X. And we can put some of those comments on the screen. So Lynn says each word has meaning. And this is where the discipline comes in. Because after all, Trump is trying to win an election. One thing America doesn't like, race talk. One thing America gets real uncomfortable talking about, race talk. It's everywhere. It's all around us. But that doesn't mean we like it. That doesn't mean we want to talk about it. And that doesn't mean we want to set things up like this. Oh, I didn't know she was black. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I understand the point that Trump is trying to get at, that the media is trying to make Kamala this super diverse candidate because they like to tout the fact that she's the first woman as vice president, first black woman as vice president, and first South Asian. It's very specific on the region of Asia that they use. And all that is just labels. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't get the job done. And that's where Trump should be focusing, not on trying to debate whether Kamala Harris is Indian or black. Because again, you're trying to influence people to vote for you, not trying to tick people off or make people go, God, you did it again. You did it again. Because I think people want to vote for Trump's policies, Republican policies, because they're more in line with prosperity than Democrats' high tax policies. They just are. But then there's this. The whole personality comes with it. Because here's the big thing about America. We don't vote based on facts and logic. We vote based on what? Emotions. Emotions. So that is the key here. And even to here, Rhonda, right? This is where we get really weird about race because we're trying to super define all these things. And oftentimes, I remember Obama said this in 2007 when he was running. He did a 60 minutes interview. And his mom is white. His dad is black. And I can't remember the journalist who interviewed him, but he asked him about that. And Obama said, I don't know that I determined that I was black. I think that the way that people looked at me and the way that people treated me is what made me black. And I would say the same thing with Kamala Harris. To me, you look at her, you obviously see that she looks black to me. Again, I'm not going to go down all the different lines here, but it's not even worth talking about. But this is the kind of questioning you invite when you take on the whole DEI thing, that she's a DEI candidate. And I know what the message behind that is, that she's not effective and she wasn't chosen because of skill. Well, say that. Say that Kamala Harris has not been known to execute in any of the offices that she's run. Highlight the fact that her staff has quit. Highlight that Kamala discourages eye contact. At least that's what some of the gossip says. That's what you highlight. That's how you stay disciplined. You stay on message. You stay on message and you stay disciplined in your communication by telling us why your policies are better for me as a voter. And this is Nate. Nate knows. It is different than that. Let me pull that up. Thank you, Lynn. This is the one I want right there. See that? It is. It's a very long, dark rabbit hole. And it's not worth for white folks trying to debate. It's just dumb. It's just not something we should be doing. I'm just, again, discipline, message. If the goal is to win, everything you should say, everything that comes out of your mouth from now until November should be geared towards getting someone who didn't vote for you in 2020 to vote for you in 2024. But this is it. This is where lack of discipline hurts you in your life, hurts me in my life, and is hurting Trump right now. So we'll continue here. Again, this is Trump, former president, running again, going to the National Association of Black Journalists, which he gets credit for because it's a hostile audience. But he steps into the race and questions whether Kamala is black or Indian.
Until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black. And
that right there. She happened to turn black. He didn't plan that line. He didn't go to his Republican strategists ahead of this interview and say, what should I say? She turned black? They're going to be like, no, don't say that.
Now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe that she is...
I think somebody should look into that too when you ask continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some Republicans
I really don't
have
know.
said?
I mean, I really.
Now he's saying, I don't know. Okay, well, that has been a very big part of the right-wing media, Trump media attack. Again, fine. Say whatever you want. But if you're trying to win elections, think about the people you need to vote for you. And is this something that they like? Again, going back to the climate change. Is that really going to get you to change your mind and go, you know what? Yeah, I'm not going to take that vacation because those lovely people with orange paint went into Heathrow Airport and sprayed the signs. You know, they really sent me a message that, yeah, you know what? I just really need to avoid that. And I'm only saying this because there seems to be a lot of confidence on the Trump side. I believe that confidence is misplaced. I believe a little humility is in order because the entire election changed, and it actually plays into Kamala's strengths. Because America already knows Donald Trump. We already know what we think about Donald Trump. Every single one of us has an opinion about Donald Trump. And here's the thing. I'm going to pull this up here. You recognize that name? Tommy Lauren. Big time Republican. Big time MAGA. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, she writes, but making Kamala a martyr for her race and gender is going to really backfire on the Trump campaign. Key line here. It's such an unforced error because it lacks discipline. The strategy is only going to allow Kamala to escape her radical record and radical policies, Tommy writes. I really don't understand why the GOP seems to enjoy pissing winnable elections down our legs. Because this should be easy. This should be a layup. It should be open and shut case. Trump has a lot of baggage. Kamala does too. It's exposing that baggage. That's where you stay on discipline. You don't talk about race. It should be obvious, but for whatever reason is not. Here's another thing here. This is an article from the Free Press. Free Press is a great website, by the way. You should check it out. It is a couple of former New York Times writers that got so disenchanted with the media, they started their own page. This is a column in that newspaper, freepress.com, I think is what it is. The vast majority of American families prefer Republican policies, right? And this is the big thing about discipline. There's a congressional race here, CD 8. That is the one in Arizona where Blake Masters, who ran for Senate a couple of years ago, and Abe Hamada, who ran for Attorney General a couple of years ago, they both lost, both running in this district. Abe Hamada is going to win. And this is one of those strange scenarios that proves this point that, yeah, Republicans like lower taxes, or American families like prosperity. We like prices to be competitive. We don't want to feel like we have to get a mortgage every time we go to the grocery store or Costco. The vast majority of American families prefer Republican policies. It's the messengers who are so often the problem. Again, lacking discipline, right? And then she continues in this column on the Free Press. And perhaps that's especially the case this year. Greg, you nailed it right here. This is what I worry about. This is, and again, I have so many personal challenges with Trump. He goes against so many of my American values that I've put in the forefront of my talk radio career that I can't sit here and tell you that he is a freedom-loving, small government American. Some of that he is, but it's this. The message that he says, the message that he sends, the lack of discipline that he has, the fact that he can't stay on task. And Rhonda, I'm sorry. Rhonda's stuck in CD 8. Well, at least you got your guy. Abe Hamada is going to be your congressman, and he can be that congressman for as long as he wants, but I expect that he's not going to stop there. I expect that at some point he'll make a run for Senate. Because usually these guys look at him as stepping stones. I should have run for that race. That's what I should have done. It's right down the street. I'm technically in Schweikert's district by about maybe half a mile. If I walk half a mile, I'm in your district, Rhonda, CD 8. So maybe in 2 years. Yeah, right. I am, speaking of discipline, I'm way more I am more disciplined than Trump, but I don't have a compelling enough message to win that people will be like, yeah, okay, let's do this. But I think there's something else to this comment, again, from the Free Press. The vast majority of American families prefer Republican policies because I think that there is a massive wake up in the world that we have access to information that we haven't had before. And we can see by putting the patterns and pieces together where this country really is. $35 trillion in debt. That's awesome. Good for us. Kicking butt. Exceeding our economic output, just in debt. Over $1 trillion of your money spent just paying interest. So they take $1.2 trillion out of our paychecks from corporate America that we pay for in higher prices. And the government is just flushing it down the toilet, servicing debt. So imagine what that $1 trillion could be spent on. $1 trillion could be spent on educating kids across this country, or maybe working on some injustices. Because this point here about Republican policies, going back to it, it's funny. I've spent a pretty good amount of time with Annalise Ortiz. She's a representative currently. She just won her Senate seat, her primary, but she doesn't face a Republican opponent. So in January, she'll be State Senator Annalise Ortiz. I like her a lot. I do. She wants more funding than I want for government. But what she cares about at the base of it is injustice. That's exactly what I've always cared about, because America's always been a country that strives to be equal, but has never quite got there. That's why it's progress. It's moving forward. It's Republican policies of prosperity that really can lift up everybody. Because if you go to Maryville and you go to Glendale, it's a community that feels that they're forgotten about because no one comes and talks to them. And you have to give Representative Ortiz credit. She knocked on herself about 12,000 doors. I did like 50 or 60 with her one night. So think about that. The commitment it takes to knock on 12,000 doors. That's where you really make a difference. And obviously a presidential candidate can't do that. The Secret Service would flip out. But in Congressional District 8, Ron, did anybody knock on your door? Any of these Republican candidates? They come, hey, you know what? I'm running for Congress. Here are my positions. And if they knocked on your door, would you have opened the door? Because oftentimes you don't. So of the 12,000 doors that Ortiz knocked on, her campaign knocked on about 30,000 more. They had about 8,500 conversations with voters, which is pretty solid. But it's putting in that work that makes the difference. And when you realize at the root, many people in this country care about a couple of things: their own economies, how high prices are impacting them, inflation. That is a Democrat thing too. Two people have told me in a couple of my meetings with Ortiz, they can't afford their property taxes because their home value went up so quickly. And along with it, their property tax. They're both seniors, retired. That bump is crushing them. It's forcing them to change things and what decisions that they make. Because, as we know, as we get older, we have to spend more on healthcare. So that's a factor. So we had this one gentleman had that factor. His wife, I think, has diabetes. So they're trying to figure out all these things. So prices matter. Injustice matters. And I think that for Republicans, Trump fans in particular, if you say that what the Department of Justice has done to Donald Trump is an injustice, you have something you agree with a community like Maryville and Glendale. Because traditionally, through the course of American history, the injustice happens when the power goes after the lower income communities because they can't fight back. It's basically bullying in the form of government. So imagine that if you're Trump or a Republican, you understand this and you communicate directly with discipline on those issues, because it's going to only take in the state of Arizona 20,000 people to help Trump win. Because here's the reality of America. We're very confused right now. We're very confused because what we're confused about is which party's going to bring us prosperity. Because part of it is Republicans and what Trump said. America just doesn't like that. Just isn't down with it. So it's hard to win. And when it's hard to win, it's hard to implement your policies. So we kind of vote for Democrats. And again, I'm looking at us as collective. I'm not looking at us as two parties divided and independents in the middle. Let's look at us collectively for a moment. And let's look at the signs. 2016, Donald Trump won a few states by 77,000 votes. That's why he won the Electoral College. In 2020, Biden won in those same states by less, 44,000 votes. So if anyone thinks that this vote now without Biden is going to go back to that, that's what we're heading on. That's the trend of America. So we're literally talking about this is why it's so important to be disciplined, whether you're Democrat, Kamala Harris, or Republican, or Donald Trump. Because it seems to me the Trump team's strategy is just hoping Kamala messes up, like she did so many times as vice president. But you may have noticed it. There are several different options here, several different things that are at play. In Arizona, it was 10,000 votes in 2020, 17,000 votes for Kari Lake as governor. That's why discipline matters. That's why staying on message matters. That's why finding the right message matters. And that's one of the things that Donald Trump has difficulty doing. So this is, I think, Wilfred, you're exactly right. I think you're exactly right. And I think that that's how America feels. But it's having difficulty, 20,000 people in Arizona, 17,000 people in Georgia, whatever it was, 12,000 people in Georgia, are having difficulty because that's what they want, but they don't like the guy. And again, elections are emotional. We want them to all be facts-based. We want them to be done in the right way, but it just never is. Vote for Nate. Nate writes he's running for governor, and he has a plan. I love it. I love it, Nate. That's fantastic. Just that the campaigning alone just seems a little ridiculous. Here you go. This is a good point by Greg, too. And again, comment on Facebook, comment on YouTube, comment on X. Mike and I have access to them all. And I can't wait to hear what Mike says about this tomorrow, the Trump comments, because he may completely disagree with me. And I think one of the things that we do well here is we can disagree because that's where all the fun is. Again, I'm just looking at this as a strategist. I'm looking at this as a communications specialist. And communicating your winning message is what matters. So Greg writes, do you remember Tony Snow from Fox News? I do. He was W's speechwriter. He was the press secretary for a little while too, but he had that job of, covering up for W's mistakes in communication. But let's go back to Wilfred's comment here, that he wants less taxes and less woke. This is why discipline matters. Because sometimes you don't have to say things. You don't have to point out the obvious. And you don't even have to go into an anti-LGBTQ rant. But this is obvious right here. So in women's boxing in the Olympics, this poor boxer, Italian team, Angela Carini, had to face off against an Algerian biological male, trans female. I don't know where on the thing it is. I didn't look that much into it. But this poor woman quit after 46 seconds. I've never been hit so hard in my life. It's up to the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, to judge. She's saying, I'm not here to judge it. I'm not here to speak about it. All I can tell you is it's the hardest I've ever been hit in my life. And it's seeing things like that that lets the world know that we've gone a little too far. And we need to balance it out a little bit, because this isn't an opportunity to hate on LGBTQ plus community. I don't believe that there's a good opportunity for that. I don't think it's a wise idea. I think it is about being disciplined. It is about sharing your values, understanding other people have different values, and you cannot force your values on someone, but you can communicate to influence others that your values are worthy of adopting. Because you can't control somebody else. They can't control you. So you have to understand that the world works a certain way, and you just live in it. And you have limited control over what you can do about it. But J.K. Rowling, who has been talking about this, an advocate for this, that biological men shouldn't be competing in women's sports, whether they're trans females or somewhere in the process or not. And I know that there's criteria based on estrogen levels. I don't know too much about it. But J.K. Rowling writes on Twitter, can any picture sum up our new men's rights movements better? And this is her words. The smirk of a male who's known he's protected by a misogynist sporting establishment, enjoying the distress of a woman he's just punched in the head. and whose life ambition he just shattered. She gets to say that. She has a massive platform. Message sent, picture sent, message received. The poor woman crying at the podium after the event. That sends that message better than we can. That's the message that we see. That's the message. That's the picture that may cause changes because it's influential, because she's gone through it. Outrage very rarely influences people. I'll go back to Dr. King. I love Dr. King. Dr. King is my personal hero, but I also love Malcolm X. You guys actually might like Malcolm X too, because Malcolm X, he preached something that we all need to preach. Reliance on self. Self-reliance. Be capable. Take your freedom, because you're the only one who can take it. Your freedom is personal to you. And Malcolm X understood that. So his message in the early 60s to the black community was just that. Don't wait for the government to come give you your freedoms, because they ain't going to do it. And he was right. And we talked about this the other day. We have much more influence on change than the government ever does, because the government always reacts when things become popular enough to vote for. Because you think about in the early 60s, JFK was the president. He didn't really want to get involved in civil rights because the Democrats needed the South to win. So for Kennedy, even though he agreed with many of the principles that Dr. King, maybe even Malcolm X were talking about, Kennedy was a politician. So he has to wait for the right time. So he didn't lead on that issue. Martin Luther King led on that issue. Malcolm X led on that issue. But if you look at who was more effective at having influence over America, was it Malcolm X' correct self-reliance message in the way that he delivered it? Because he was much more in your face about it. Whereas Dr. King was a preacher. Dr. King delivered his speeches with so much emotion, but he didn't judge. He just called for better. And that movement led by him, he was the only one that could have pulled it off. The only one charismatic enough, the only one who could find the right words to get Americans to go, yeah, you know what? You are right. And that's really, if Donald Trump wants to win, again, I'm just calling balls and strikes here. He needs to channel that, because it is a real clear point in America that we're in trouble as far as our spending goes, our debt load. We're in trouble because there's really ridiculous inflation. I'm not talking about month over month or year over year. We're talking about starting from the pandemic to now, prices in Phoenix are up 26%. So you need 26% more money to buy the same stuff you did in 2020. So think about that. That should be an easy message. Here is my plan to bring prices down. Tax cuts, this, that, the other thing. That's a message Americans want, because we all want to feel a little bit more comfortable going to the grocery store and going to Costco and filling up our gas tanks and looking for a new house or a new apartment. Because this is a really interesting time in America, because what may happen is Kamala Harris wins. Kamala Harris is pretty left-wing. She may govern that way as president of the United States. And if she wins and that happens, yes, we're all to blame, but we're not all to blame, because, again, emotions matter. Discipline matters. Because if Trump loses, it's Trump's fault. It's his campaign team's fault. That's it, because this should be easy. And I want to point something out that Rhonda's saying too, because Malcolm X did become a much different person after his trek to Mecca, because he was very isolated in the early 60s. He goes to Mecca, and he had this incredible broadening of his perspective, because it wasn't just black people going on the pilgrimage, the Hajj, Mecca to Medina, Medina to Mecca. I can't remember which way it goes. It was all kinds of people, all kinds of different races from all over the world. And he took that home with him, and he started to change. And as he was starting to change and broaden his message, that's when he was assassinated. He was assassinated by some of his own people, which tells you exactly that they didn't want him to change. They didn't want him to change that message. So that's what this is all about. You see this picture, you have an impression of it. That is an image that's worth 1,000 words. The one that J.K. Rowling posted too. An image that is influential. Because you see it with your own eyes. It is real as the day is. The sky is blue right now in Phoenix, Arizona. That is what it's about. Again, here we go. Because we've had the debate over and over again. And I think that most of us are okay with people living their own lives. But when you cross that line, it's something that we've never accepted, at least in modern times, a male beating up a female, a biological male, a trans female even, beating up a female. And it's all right there. The Olympic Committee is going to have to make a decision because of this. And maybe the public pressure helps, but the judgment, that what you saw Trump did, right? Watch the reaction now. Guess what the conversation is all about with Donald Trump today? That comment. That's why it's undisciplined. Because he takes the focus off how he can help America into him flirting with this weird line that's not beneficial. It's not beneficial in any way at all to say that Kamala Harris was Indian, now she's black, and she's all of a sudden a black woman. There's no benefit at all. But let's go back to this other point. Back to seeing. Our eyes are open. This is why we need good, disciplined messengers. Because freedom is at stake in many different ways. Both sides of the aisle flirt with taking away our freedoms. Republicans have done it for a long time. Conservative justices have allowed the police to have more power. Democrats do it in various ways as well. Schools in California being a perfect example of that, how parents have no rights. But even 12-year-olds are starting to understand how this process works. And this is a 12-year-old girl, Greg and Val, from your country, from Canada. She shows up to this meeting, and she seemingly understands the world and has discipline in her message more so than all of us do. Let's see if I can get it to play here. For some reason, it is not playing. Of course, it's not playing because it's live, and you know how it goes. Let's try it again. If it doesn't work, I'll figure it out. Well, it's not going to play, so let me take that away. And this is kind of the deal. Is her point is, I'm going to try to load it in again.
Why Canada is in debt? Have you ever wondered why the government forces Canadians to pay so many taxes? Have you ever wondered why the bankers from the largest private banks are becoming wealthier and the rest of us are not? What I have discovered is the banks and the government have colluded to financially enslave the people of Canada. The government borrows money from the private banks. They then lend the debt-based money to Canada with compounded interest. The government then continues to increase taxation of Canadians year after year in order to pay back the interest on the exponentially growing national debt. What results is inflation. The government gave the banks the ability to loan out money that doesn't exist in the form of loans. They click a key on a computer and generate the fake money out of thin air. They don't actually have it in their bank vaults. Presently, the banks only have $4 billion on reserve, but they have loaned out over $1.5 trillion. Their freedom, and they need to be stopped. It said the following, and I hope that all of you remember this. Never doubt that a small group of people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has.
Not governments, not politicians, us. Craig, Val, what is the age limit on becoming Prime Minister of Canada? Can you elect a 12-year-old to run the country because she seemingly understands it better than Trudeau does? Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister. Craig, you might be right about this comment as well. Remember, historians will call this the stupid era. They're going to call it something. That's for sure. But, I think that what I realize in myself in growing up in a normal life, middle-class house, small town, suburban Boston, parents that love me, got to go to college that I wanted to. But I didn't understand things about how my own body works until recently. That my emotions drive my decisions. My beliefs drive my decisions. But when I learned that I could manage my own emotions, I don't have to speak up if I'm mad. Silence is a great communication technique because when you're feeling something, you're going to speak that emotion. And it doesn't always come out the greatest way. We've all been there, right? Been angry with a friend, been angry with a partner. I certainly have. And you learn those lessons, and then you understand how your emotions get pulled and triggered all the time, particularly on one of these devices. So if you're on Twitter, if you're on Facebook all the time, you're on Instagram all the time, they're giving you things to piss you off every single day. That takes you out of your logical brain, puts you in your emotional body. Your emotional body is different than your logical brain. Your logical brain is what you have to tap into to stay disciplined despite what your body is doing. And that takes training, effort, and exercises. Got a lot of tools for those. If anybody wants a couple of them, let me know. I can I can send them. But you're right, Rhonda, silence is golden. Like Trump didn't have to go there yesterday. He didn't have to. He could have said, you know what? I'm not really concerned if Kamala's a DEI candidate. What I'm concerned about is her policies. I'm concerned that she wants to continue to have an open border policy. I'm concerned that it's going to sap the entire court system. And I say, let me ask you about this. How much money do you think it takes to adjudicate 10 million people that are currently claiming asylum in the United States? And I would assume that Trump could come up with a number. And he could say, 10 million people, it's going to cost $5,000 per person. Here's the math on that. I mean, it's going to be way more than that. And it's going to take 10 years for this process to work out. Is that fair to the people that came here to the United States? Under this false pretense that they're all going to qualify for asylum. Asylum is very tricky to get. But the Biden administration, with Harris at the helm, decided to overwhelm the American court system, which is now going to take resources out of seniors' pockets. It's going to take resources out of public schools. This migration policy is going to take resources from actually fighting terrorism because of these policies that Kamala Harris has put in place. That's how you win. How you win is you say Kamala Harris has never held an executive position in her life. I have no idea how she's going to execute the federal government, because here's what I learned as president. I'll tell you, my first 2 years was a huge learning curve. I ran one of the biggest businesses in America for a very long time. I made all the primary principal decisions in that. In Washington, D.C., running the executive branch, completely different. So here's what I learned. I know how to execute things, but I learned how to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Kamala doesn't know how to do that. She's never had to run that. Vice president's a great role, but you don't actually have to do anything. You don't have to execute anything. And let's look at what the vice president has executed on. You've heard the rumors as much as I have that the staff doesn't like working for her. You've maybe seen the gossip that Kamala doesn't like people looking her in the eyes. Is that the type of leader America really wants? Look, she sounds good on stage. She's got a great story, great background, rose up the ranks in California, even lean into the fact that they're telling the story, but you pop the bubble that it's just a story. I mean, that's what I would do. That's what I would do. If you have ideas, please share them, because I really think that this is a big place for America to be adults and have adult conversations, or having a conversation like a 12-year-old who understands how the system works. Well, look, I know that many people, this is what I mean by story. And Nate, I will. Nate writes, great story? Huh? Great story for a porno. That may be true. But the other guy, too, both of them have sexual histories, shall we say. But this is what I mean by story. As a communications expert, one of the other things that I teach people to do is use storytelling. Why? Because storytelling works. Storytelling is what you remember. That's why you're told the story of the tortoise and the hare. The hare is faster than the tortoise, so the hare takes off knowing he's going to win the race. Takes a little nap. 3/4 of the way through the race, wakes up, finds that the turtles passed him and the turtles won the race. Slow and steady wins the race is the message, the fable behind that. You will remember that story as long as you live because our brains are hardwired to remember stories. That's why there's always a narrative at play. That's why the story gets built up about Kamala Harris. Because here's the deal. This has been a story that we've been working on in America for a very long time. First female president. We tried it in 2016, and she got so close. 77,000 votes, I think, across 3 states. Hillary captured those 77,000 votes. She's the president of the United States. History is written. First female, Hillary Clinton. America loves that. We love firsts. We become accustomed to firsts. But women were robbed that chance in 2016. So now in 2024, they have another chance, a redo. That's exciting. Maybe not to you, but it's exciting to a lot of people. So again, it's always good to play in the real world. The real world tells me, based on my political knowledge and background, Kamala has the momentum right now. Trump is struggling. Trump's team was completely caught off guard by the Biden, I'm out, Kamala's in move. They've been flat-footed. They've gone race. They've gone DEI. They didn't attack, pop the bubble on the story, Nate, to your point, because there are ways to poke holes in the story without doing it. And I'll let Lynn say it. I'm not going to read. Point out Kamala's screw-ups, which is another reason why you want to watch live every day at noon, Arizona time, 3 p.m. Eastern time, because some of the comments get right to the point. That's it, right? You don't have to be what you think you have to be because, again, going back to this idea of the communication channels, you can communicate one of 2 ways, and you get to decide. You can communicate to affirm an audience's beliefs. I'm here to tell you what you already know and what you already believe. But it's not effective in getting more people on board. So if you choose that way, which Trump did at this National Association of Black Journalists, went in with the fight, wanted to be the fighter, but it backfired because even Tommy Lauren on his side, on Trump's side, called him out for that. Or you can decide to influence, to push people to be better the way that Dr. King did. And you can still even channel your inner Malcolm X if you want. You can get fiery about it, but you still have to aim to influence people to vote for you. That's the name of the game, but that's the name of the game for you too. Whatever business you're in, if you're trying to sell, close more deals, you're going to present at work. And I know, Brendan, you and I have had several conversations about communication styles. Always be thinking about what the audience wants and how do you deliver that to them. But go beyond affirming their beliefs. And this is one of the strategies that I used in my talk career because I have some different positions than many Republicans. I have much more libertarian beliefs, hands off, let me live my life, self-reliance, Malcolm X. And that rubs some Republicans the wrong way. In 2004, way before gay marriage became a real popular issue, I debated my audience on that. I hate the term my audience. It's sorry, I don't mean to say it like that, but I went on air and I had people call me and I said, challenge me. Make the case that the government should be allowed to regulate who gets married. And nobody could do it because it's an indefensible position. And this, where I differ a lot, is in the morality of how Republicans traditionally try to make morals the law. And it never works. If you're going to force me to live a certain way, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do all kinds of things that you're not looking, and I'm going to be mad at you for trying to make me do it. You're oppressing me. So I never understood that because morality is values. The best way to get someone to adopt a different moral standpoint is to share the values and the benefits of having it, that moral side of things, not trying to write it into law. Because it's really the world that we live in, right? And we want to express our opinions and express ourselves, and that's fine. But what is the point of you expressing this opinion? What are you trying to get across? What are you trying to do? What is your goal? Because we're an emotional country. We're an emotional people. In fact, I have 3 pillars of human communication, which you guys will all know. Number 1, humans are emotional and will sometimes react emotionally. Often react emotionally. Number 2, you can only control you. Nate, I can't control what you say. You can't control what I say. Rhonda, same thing. Brendan, you guys know I can't control what you say. I can't pull the string on the back of your puppet and whoop, just get you to say something. So my job is to stay in control and stay disciplined and try to communicate as effectively and clearly as possible. And in a political situation, why I'm the better candidate than my opponent. Because I think that if we had an adult politician right now that tried to talk this way, it would be effective. Because by and large, I get the impression that most people feel the government has failed. Republicans, Democrats, progressives, MAGA. There is consistency that what we're having right now, the results we're getting are not good. Roads have potholes in them. Crime is up. Immigration is up. The economy is starting to show different signs. There were some earnings reports this week, including McDonald's, that said inflation's really cutting into their business. That's not what we want to see. So McDonald's is thankfully trying to get innovative, introducing their $5 menu again to try to get more people to go back to McDonald's. But everybody is, because you've made adjustments. I've made adjustments. I don't go out to eat as much. I don't have the income that I had while Mike and I were working at the radio station. And even if I had, I don't know that I would go out as much because it's so expensive. And because it's so expensive and I'm cutting back and changing my spending, it impacts all types of other things downline. Servers are not getting as much tips, so they can have less of an economic impact. This is how things work. It's super important that we understand this. But we've moved so far away from understanding the fundamentals of how an economy works, even the civics of how our government works. It is so much easier to get into that space and really manipulate people based on their emotions. Because I can imagine how the Kamala Harris's campaign is going to play out. And I hear you, Lynn. Lynn saying McDonald's is not in his budget. I went to Wendy's. I've told you the Taco Bell story. I went to Taco Bell. I was putting up signs, political signs for our friend David Schweikert running for Congress in my district. It was like 8:30 one night. I'm like, oh, cool. I'll just eat when I'm done. Swung by Taco Bell because, usually you can get in and out for $10. 4 tacos, 1 Crunchwrap Supreme, no drink, $16. Just me. Wendy's, I had the same problem. I got a double cheeseburger and a chicken sandwich. And I didn't even remember the price. It was like $14. And I'm like, I didn't get fries, I didn't get a drink. I was like, this is not for me anymore. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. But that impacts that Wendy's that's in my neighborhood. So whoever owns that Wendy's getting less money because I'm not going as often. Prosperity is what matters. Prosperity is what ultimately determines whether or not a country succeeds or becomes Europe or worse. Because I think that we are on road to become much like Europe, where heavy debt loads cause service cuts, cut prosperity. It's harder to make a living. There's less opportunities for you to make a good living. That's all there, which is why this should be an easy election to win. But I can see how the Kamala Harris campaign is going to go out. They're building up her story right now. She's actually had a really great line the other night when she told Donald to say it to her face, because Trump is hemming and hawing about the debates. So she's seizing her moment. Will it last? I don't know. Can she make it last? I don't know. But this is ideally suited for Kamala. Short window. She didn't have any primary opponents. She didn't have to travel around the country campaigning, going into Iowa, New Hampshire, trying to win votes. This is the perfect scenario for her to run for president. She's started strong in 2020 and faded. I would highlight that because it was her execution that was poor. As president, you need to be an executive. It's the executive branch of government. But we'll see what happens because all kinds of strange things happen. This doesn't mean Trump isn't going to win. He still has ample opportunities to win. He's got a debate. He can switch gears because what Kamala's going to do is build up her story for the next month or two, month and a half. And then she's going to remind us all about stolen election, stolen election, stolen election. And then you're going to see a lot of images of January 6th. Why? Because they work. Because we're emotional. Human communication pillar number 1. We're emotional and we'll sometimes react emotionally, including voting. And the fact that Trump has never really dealt with the negative parts of his image very well, January 6th, almost leaned into it. If I were running against him, that's what I'd play. I'm like, hey, here's the guy that did the national anthem for the January 6th guys. Because again, right, MAGA may think the January 6th people were victims, over-prosecuted. And the Supreme Court just said they were over-prosecuted. But most of America doesn't like that image of people running in the Capitol and fighting with cops. It's not really an American tradition by way that we look at things. So that's the campaign. And all of a sudden it's October and people start voting in October because we get our ballots early. So before we get out of here, I know we did a lot of politics today, but I do love strategy and I do love messaging, but I also like drinking. Something funny, just to end it on a bit of a lighter note or a drunker note. The top 10% of alcohol drinkers in the U.S. consume 74 drinks per week. Wow. That's 10 a day. Anybody in here in that category? Just curious. Because this is what we often see. We often see in America a stat and an average, but when you look at averages, oftentimes they're top heavy, like this. 74 drinks a week. That's a lot. And that's top 10%. So how many people drink in America? Lots of them. You used to be, Greg? Oh, man. That Brendan says that's it. I'm like down to some weeks I might have more, but I don't drink as much as I used to. In fact, Mike and I, the Brewmance was built around beer. But, you know, beer sticks with you when you get older. It's harder to get rid of. But hey, that's it. But here's the other part, too. There's another stat example. 5% of Americans are responsible for 50% of healthcare spending. 5% responsible for 50% of healthcare spending. Because there's a lot of unhealthy people in this country. And part of the challenge we have now is we just refuse to talk about difficult things. Because people don't like changing. People don't want to change. So we just avoid it. And we end up yelling at each other. And yelling at each other, calling each other names, doing what Donald Trump did at the National Association of Black Journalists, questioning Kamala's race, not effective. It's affirming to certain people, but not effective and to move the country in the right direction. Because what's going to happen, no matter who wins, is 2025 is going to come and it's going to stay divided. If Kamala wins, she's going to govern America for Democrats. If Trump wins, he's going to govern for his MAGA fans. Very rarely now do politicians say, you know what, I'm going to reach across the aisle and I'm going to govern everybody. And maybe that ties into this stat here that the top 1% of politicians are the ones that are ruining America. But here's the deal. With all things, and remember, we're in control. We decide these things. So if anyone is truly to blame for the situation we find ourselves in, it's us, collectively. Because I think we started abandoning this idea that we're all in it together, in that the two sides, the two parties, they control everything and only control things for themselves. Because if you looked at the party as an institution, Republicans and or Democrats, and you looked at the system that they are, what are they? Power systems, money systems. That's what they are. It's not a system designed to help your life be better. It's not a system designed to help you get more money, get a better job, live a little bit better. No, it's a system designed to put people in power to spend your money they take from you in your taxes. That's what parties are. That's what governments are. And we put them there. And it's apparent to me how obviously voters don't think of strategy in winning. Kari Lake versus Mark Lamb's a perfect example. As soon as Kari Lake got that Trump endorsement, 55% of Republican voters were like, cool, I'm done. I don't need to learn about anybody else. I don't need to investigate the Senate. I don't need to know who Kari Lake's running against because I'm just going to do what Trump wants me to do. And in the meantime, you miss out on a guy who can carry out the same policies. He's just not as flamboyant. He's just not as affirming as Kari Lake is. But now Kari Lake has put herself in this interesting position where she may lose to a horrible Democrat candidate, a true progressive, left-wing guy. and Ruben Gallego. Now, again, a lot can change in the next 3 months, but I have not seen one poll that's put Kari Lake ahead of Ruben Gallego, and Ruben Gallego is barely campaigning because it goes back to Rhonda. Did you say it right? Silence is golden. When you're Kamala Harris, just let Trump talk. That's what Biden did, and Biden won. We can say he campaigned in the basement. It was true. It was obvious that he showed signs of aging then, but he won because he just stayed quiet. Trump filled the room, and America decided, 3 states, 44,000 people, decided they wanted a guy that ran in this basement. So the Democrat playbook against Trump is to do just that. Let him talk. We'll stay silent. Because the more he talks, Trump, the more emotional people get, not in a good way. And that's something you got to contend with. Again, this is just me being real with you, based on what I've done with politics over the last 25 years, based on internal polling data that I've seen, that Trump beating Biden was because Biden's horrible. It wasn't because Trump's awesome. And Trump has not tried to change that impression that millions of Americans have on him one time. It's bizarre. Going down with the ship strategy. I mean, he still might win. Like I said, I'm not complete doom and gloom on it. But there's an easier path for him to win if he stayed disciplined in his communication, which is the message for you today and myself as well. Stay disciplined. Stay on message. Influence is what we're after here. Not firing up people's emotions over issues we've discussed a million times and get mad about a million times. Because that's another thing I've noticed in 25 years of doing talk radio. Same debates all the time. Second Amendment. Consistent debate over 25 years and not much has changed on it. Second Amendment is still there. It's actually being more reinforced now than it has been in a long time. But we're still talking about it like it's going away tomorrow. It's not going away tomorrow. So with that, if we know there are certain things that are already established, what should we be talking about to move this country forward? I look for your feedback on that. Mike will be back with us tomorrow. My name is Rob Hunter. This is Russell and Hunter's The Bromance. You guys are our people. Thank you so much. Many of you have shared this out, invited other people in to catch these conversations because they're not designed to be the same conversations over and over again. Second Amendment. Trump this, Trump that. Let's talk strategy. Let's talk winning. Let's talk about communication. Let's talk about our differences. Let's disagree. Let's have some fun while we're doing it. Meanwhile, for me, I'm going to have about 7 drinks right now because I'm going to try to get in that top 10%. Am I kidding? If I'm here tomorrow, you know I was. If not, and I'm nursing a hangover, I might not be. Until then, subscribe, rate, review, share it out, like it, do all the things. Help us grow and have more people in this conversation. Because, Greg, you're right. Let's talk generations. Cheers. We'll see you tomorrow.